Macy's has all of your Grill Master essentials for Father's Day. Stop by to get our hand-trimmed chicken breast and certified Angus beef patties that are ready to grill, so Dad can have his favorite dinner. Make sure to browse our bakery to find the perfect no-work Father's Day treat with our decadent peanut butter bars or famous donuts. Right now, you can get boneless beef ribeye steaks for $12.99 per pound at Macy's. Shop these Father's Day essentials in-store or online at Macys.com through June 18th. Macy's, happy shopping!
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Behind the Human. I'm your host, Mark Champagne. It's my job to unpack the stories and mental fitness practices of people living at the top of their game, personally and professionally. Today, we have a real awesome and fun human, Mike Pearson, who's a seasoned professional in the watch industry, currently serving as the North American brand director for Christopher Ward, a British luxury watch brand known for its innovative designs and direct-to-consumer model, a brand I've been a huge fan of and passionately when wearing their products now for quite some time. Don't worry, for everyone listening, you're like, wait a second, is this going to be a watch episode or watch review? Maybe a little bit, but it's still very much, we're going to talk about the mental fitness behind, of course, Mike, but then also just a lot, I think at least, around brand expansion and what's required in the mind to do all of this, because that's a lot of Mike's experience and so forth. Then I also do believe, and hang with me on this, if for longtime listeners, I think we've got a good trust build, but I think there's a huge element to mental fitness and timepieces as reminders, intention setters, affirmations, all that kind of stuff. So I know it might seem a little bit far out there, but I've been living it, and I know there's a lot of really good stories behind a lot of these watches. So a little bit of a long-winded intro, Mike. Welcome to the show, but just giving people a little bit of a teaser in what I think is about to come.
No, thank you, Mark. It's great to be here. Thanks for the opportunity. It's good to talk.
Yeah, can't wait. So I've got a bunch of, obviously people can probably hear this, a bunch of topics I'd love to jump into, and we'll flow naturally. But like every guest has received at this point, and we're almost at 400 at this point. Can't believe it. It's been quite the ride. Everyone's got the same question to open up, and that's just to strip away essentially the titles that I just described and some of your backstory and just get down to the fundamentals. And that's, who are you, Mike?
Wow, it's a big question.
Just to start your morning, right?
I know. I've only had one coffee, but at 43 years of age, I'm looking at you in this screen. I'm like, gosh. The wrinkles, the smile lines, they all captured a certain part of the last few decades in this industry. I think first and foremost, I'm a dad and I'm a husband. And I think that's really important for everyone to know. It's really important for me to always remember that. And especially, we talked before we press record, the traveling and the meetups that I do and the events that really are important. But it's the times with my kids and the downtime that might not be as easy as what you'd find with some dads and mums out there that would come in from work and they've got 6 till dinner, then the dinner till bedtime. Yeah. I sometimes have days and days where I can be at home. I can be part of the summer, but then there's days and days where I'm away altogether. So when I'm talking about who I am, I'm very proud to be a dad. And I know that I do this job and I grow brands for myself and for my family. But I also know that indirectly, this affects all the people that work for Christopher Ward. And all the brands that I've worked for. So yeah, I'm a dad.
Yeah. I love that. I mean, I'm a dad as well, two young kids. I so really resonate with that as well. I'm curious, I'd love to pull on one of the threads that you mentioned, just this notion of, you're away right now, you're in New York City right now doing events and so forth. And you live in Texas, right? I believe?
Yes. Yeah. As you can tell by my accent.
Exactly, right? Well said, well played.
Just to confuse everybody.
I'm
the most un-Texan Texas person you could ever meet.
That's got to be fun in itself.
It definitely turned some heads. It sounds a bit pompous, but when we moved back to Texas, I went to England for 1 year after COVID. And when we came back to Texas, back to America, I very luckily, the company that moved me over let me bring my car. And it was a very, very old, crappy Defender, a Land Rover Defender from the mid-90s. But for me, it was a bit of me, bit of England, and it was important when we came back. So when I'm driving around the streets of Texas or the big highways in Texas, the looks I get are absolutely hilarious. Especially,
and you're on the wrong side, right?
It's all on perspective, that is, though, Mark, isn't it? It's all perspective here. But I'm on the right side of the car, on the other side of the, and also I've got a stick shift, so I'm doing it with my left hand. The best is when you get to a Starbucks and they're like, I do not know what to do right here, buddy.
You've got to back into the drive-thrus. I love it.
Something like that.
Oh, that's hilarious. We're going to have a great chat. I'm already laughing. This is good. Oh, sorry. What I wanted to ask you about was just the line you said about, being away for stretches, but then also at home and so forth, and being able to strike that balance, like in your own mind.
Mm-hmm.
What's helped you to just, I guess, be content with, like, that's the setup right now. And like you said, it's, some people are home all the time. Some people are never home, but you've got to kind of balance, like, you're not home right now. So is there anything that helps you just, I guess, level set, or if you have any narratives that are running your head, in your mind, that you're like, hey, I'm not home, and you're not feeling good about that kind of thing. Like, what helps for those who travel?
I think of it as, I go back a little bit before I met my now wife. I was working for another brand and probably was traveling on the road all the time. I was in my late 20s, then it was early 30s. And throughout that time I was, and I don't say this word in a negative way, I was selfish with my time because there was nobody else to give it to. Yeah. So my time was to the job. But then also when I was away, I would, use money and time in a city like New York to, instead of sitting in a hotel playing Angry Birds, I would find a baseball game, or I'd go to Madison Square Garden, or I'd find a great restaurant you've got to do, or I would make friends that would be having similar interests. And in my case, it was soccer. I follow a team. And so I'd always find a bit away, but it also meant that home was a place that would always decompress. It would be a place I wouldn't talk about watches. It wouldn't. And I lived in Michigan for a decade. And as great as that place is, and as much of a watch scene it does have, that's in pockets. So where I lived, it was in a place which would have great parks, great lakes, great gyms. And that would be my time to ride a bike or take a walk, or, just go for a quiet beer or a coffee. And as much as I'll talk, and you and your listeners might hear that by the end of this podcast as, wow, that guy likes to chat, I also know that I have to decompress and not. So I then met my now wife, and as we were dating, I ended up asking her to move to New York with me, which we can get into if need be later on. So she'd quit her job. And then by the time we were as close as we now are, I was about to ask her to marry me. We found out we were going to have a child. And so that whole process of travel, work came to a screeching halt in my mind, head and heart. Yeah. And after almost a decade with one brand, I wanted to stop. And I had a massive about face and went to a normal 9-to-5 style job. And it became quite apparent that I was losing a huge part of who I am by not having that balance of maybe within my head and heart, going back to that point. But also, which is quite interesting, as much as my wife and I are best mates, partners, she also knew quite quickly that maybe this life wasn't for me, which meant for us, we couldn't quite do what we needed to do as a team, which we always are a very proud team. So I would say that maybe those times where I would go to my parents, where my mom might want to watch a cooking show, very stereotypical, but she loves it. And my dad might go and watch Top Gear. They would go to different rooms. Maybe when I'm away, she can have that decompression for me and the routine of together to have her space. Yeah. And I have it with mine when I'm on the road. I also found that on the planes, I got to have those emails without distractions. The phones weren't there. The phones couldn't be turned on. And so I fast forward 10, 15 years into where I am today. I think all those experiences and ones that we haven't even discussed yet, I've come to that point where my kids know that daddy travels. They also know that with my travel, it means that when I come back, that time is just for them. The phone is to the side. Obviously, sometimes it's up, but when it's them and we play Barbies or on the trampoline or we go swimming, that's their time and they love it. We all put a lot of pressure on ourselves about being there all the time. We just can't. Yeah. So what I found is if I am back, I'm very lucky to know that I can take a couple of days. Maybe it's a Tuesday or Wednesday, or it could be a Saturday, Sunday, Monday, the traditional. But those hours are just as important as that consistency you might find in normal lives, because mine definitely isn't because of schedule.
Yeah. I love that. I mean, and I think I love that you said, we put a lot of pressure on ourselves when it comes to, I guess, like stereotypical, like how it should be as parents and how you should show up for your work and so forth, which, I mean, in especially in today's age, I don't think there's a right and wrong answer there. I mean, I think we
No.
need to individually figure out what works for us. I mean, I resonate, at least in the way that you operate, is I also travel when I'm working with teams and so forth, and actually do notice that, like, I need some of that, like in those moments, it's I don't know, there's this, I think you described it, like that time where you're intentional, you're at events, but you're also taking time away as well to kind of decompress and manage it all. Kind of same thing on this side. And then to your point though, when you come back, you take that same strategy or philosophy or that intentionality with family and the kids, and I think that's awesome.
Thank you.
And
Well,
that
I think
works.
it feels like when I'm out on the road, especially when I do an event, there could be 30 people, there could be 250 people, there could be something like yourself that would have a bigger audience in a digital way. But it's showtime, isn't it? Like that's the work. But also, what I've found now in all those years of doing the watch industry, or being part of the watch industry, which is 17 years now.
Wow.
Started very young, but you then know yourself, and so that showtime becomes so important to yourself because it's not fake. Because you then find that showtime, you get to pull the bits of your personality that resonate with someone who will buy into your brand, because it goes back to that old adage of people buy people, and people trust a product if they can trust the person. And I've really, really found that lovely marriage of who I am, being professional, but knowing that being yourself is really important.
Well, but I also think, and this is just a assumption, obviously on my side, or projection, that I suspect if you didn't take some of that time when you're in these locations for yourself in various ways, because it would be challenging to be on during showtime in a way. Like it's not sustainable, because I think anyone who can resonate, who works with people or travels and whatnot, sometimes there's this like illusion of, oh wow, like you get to go to these places, but it's exhausting. I mean, you're holding space for, in your case, sometimes hundreds of people. You're on. I mean, some people get energized from that, and I have a bit of that as well. But it's a lot energetically.
It's a huge amount. It's a huge amount of energy, mentally and physically. I mean, this week for Christopher Ward, which doesn't matter if you're listening digitally 3 years from now, but I have the keys to the Instagram reins. I mean, the reins to the Instagram. And I played on my own thing about a reel to kind of show behind the curtain of the time I woke up, which was 4 a.m., getting a coffee, stroking the dog, leaving the house, going into the Uber, all the endless trains through the airport, the sitting on it, but I was like, no one needs to ever see or know that when you go to an event, because for those 2 hours where someone comes to see us, or in my old case, it would be going to a retailer and pitching the brand, or seeing customers, or doing a trade show. No one cares. No one has to care. It's about the fact we are there, so you have to show up. But then the other side of it is, when you've done that travel, you can sit there and you can be a little bit good. You can be good about yourself and sit here and watch the Olympics like I am right now, or watching the news this morning. But there's a whole world out there, so I go and see it. But do it in a way where, and this is the biggest bit of advice I was told I think this was like 2001. I was just 21 and I first went away. One of my immediate bosses back then said, Mike, just pace yourself. Because you've got to know your body. And I have an absorbent amount of energy, and it can be a lot for some people to see. But I also know that pacing yourself means I've got more for the next day. Yeah. And then the recent advice, now getting into the age I am, is nothing good happens after 9 p.m. Nothing important in business. I mean, you can go to a show. Yes, you can go to a sporting event. You can have a quiet beer. But if you think you're going to tie one on, the next day you're awful. So 9 p.m., I'm like, I'm good. I can go back.
Exactly. I'm out. Pull the cord.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I have to ask, how and why watches? Like, how did this, you just said 17 years. How did it all begin? Why the fascination?
Okay, well, let's go back again. I feel like I've got to open up a whiskey bar here and have that little toast to all those years ago. So it all started, and I think if anyone's ever heard me on a podcast before, I apologize, but it all started through a bad thing. I think anything good in life sometimes is a result of something bad. And I would say I've really only had three things that are really bad to my life. And one was my mother's health. She's still with us, God love her. But all growing up, it and it was never great. She's a very so poorly lady, but beautiful with it. And that also, I think, pushed me to travel. Honestly, that was the reason why I wanted to see more of the world, because you never know what tomorrow is. The big thing really that was the crux of my life was on New Year's Day, 2021, I had a car crash. Someone came into the side of my car. The car basically passed me by. And as I came out of my seat and came through the passenger side window, I didn't have a seatbelt on. If I had a seatbelt on, I would have been cut in half. The only reason why I didn't have it on was to literally half a mile before I leant over to reach for a tissue to clean my nose. So all weird. So when you're sitting on the road and you can see your car flying past you, and you know that something's bad, but I was conscious through it all. It was like, oh my God, I'm so lucky. And I knew that there and then. And when I was sitting there and, you're buzzing. I don't know if you've ever had you fell off a chair, or you had a bike crash, or if you've had something as bad as a car crash. If you are awake, there was this kind of buzz within you because things are not quite normal and things seem to slow down. And I just remember I was lying on my back and I saw red and I saw the edge of my arm and I thought I'd lost my arm, but it ended up being the fact that I had pins and needles within it and it was just blood from my head. So as I was pulling my arm straight, I was laughing on the floor as the ambulance pulled up because I knew I had my arm. It was so strange.
So weird, right? Yeah.
So strange. But there's that moment, I knew that I was lucky. Got in the ambulance, got to the hospital. I was very lucky with the injuries. Don't have to go into now, but I know that I'm very lucky. But it got to the point where just a week after coming out of hospital, I got back in the same model of the car. Obviously, my car was gone, but I got in the same model of the car just to go in that environment and say, it's okay, you can still do this, you can still drive. And also I knew after that, I had to get out and be something different, or at least experience life that's got no responsibilities one last time. And I was going to be a teacher. And that was my schooling. Primary, elementary school, I always wanted to just look after kids. And they're just great fun. And I had a way of talking to them, which seemed to help. And so I had done a course before, and I thought if I went away, why didn't I just do that one more time, go and see some sun, go see the world. And I met a friend, and she worked on cruise ships. And she said, it's the best life. You're in your 20s, you've got your second chance to really go for it. Just go for the interview. I mean, you can look after kids. There's people on there that look after kids of people on holiday. Never been to America. I'd never been on a cruise, never realized the scale of scope of size of them. So I went to the interview. They said, you can't look after kids. You need to look after adults because of your personality, and you have to entertain. You've got this big mouth, use it. So, all right, let's go.
Awesome.
All you need to do is go and have your medical. And so I went to have my medical, lied through it all, that nothing hurts because everything was broken. And they said, right, you're going to have the job. And then you're leaving to go to, where did I go? South Carolina. It was Charleston, South Carolina. And you're going to join this cruise ship. I had never seen anything like these cruise ships, and I'd never seen anything like these cities in America. But I just went for it. Wow. Within a couple of years, I'd met a girl, and I only meant to stay there for 6 months. It ended up being 5 years of my life. And to stay with the relationship, I ended up moving from a position that I'd got to, which is a cruise director, to working for a company owned by LVMH. Okay. And they had a TV channel on a lot of cruise ships telling people what to buy and where to shop ashore. So there's guys that would tell you, guys and girls would talk to you about diamonds and tanzanite, or where to get your t-shirts or your trinkets, and where to get your watches. And on that time of selling things, I know that I could probably sell anything if I put my mind to it. I didn't care for anything but watches. The romance of it all, the history, the heritage, how they're made, why they're made. Why someone like you might choose that watch and this other guy with the same kind of life might choose the other. Size, fit, color. It just fascinated me. And so after doing that for a year, I ended up with that girl moving to America. And that didn't quite work out. And then the whole world kind of went to a little bit downhill in 2008 with the recession. And so at that point, my decision was, do I go back to England or back to a life that I was enjoying because this relationship didn't work? Or there's this one brand who was very small and had no reason or rhyme to grow in the industry. They were in the Caribbean. I was promoting them on the ships, but they had an office in the state that I'd moved to, which is Michigan. And so we got together, we talked, and I think it was more maybe just pure youthful exuberance and a determination to not think that that time was wasted.
Yeah.
That I said to the owner of that brand, give me a credit card. I'm going to go make some money for you. And I can't sit here. I need to just at least try this. And within that first year, we'd opened up 26 points of sale and made lots of money for the company. So lots of watches, but I didn't care if I didn't earn a penny. I was away from a situation that wasn't right in my head. I was in a place where I didn't think about, oh God, I should be in England. Or I should be home. This relationship didn't work out. Am I a failure? I was like, I've got this. It was like blinkers for a horse. I've just got that part of the race. I've got to get to the next fence. And when I jump over it, we'll see what's there next. I had no reason, no rhyme. I had no plan. I had no ambition. I just knew that these watches were great. I knew the story. Nobody else knew them, but give me a chance and I'll tell you it. And then this kind of natural progression within myself started to grow. I saw other brands. I saw people, how they were working. And I also saw the things we did wrong and I learned from them.
Yeah.
I saw the things we did right and made it even better. And then it became the core of my being. As you can talk about nuts and bolts, cogs and wheels, and artisanship. What Americans in America, and I say this because that was the majority of who I spoke to, really need to be treated well, because they're the biggest buyers of luxury goods. But the reason why they buy so much or so many, or they're really into it, is because they are a believer of supporting the little guy, and they build them up. And they like to be on a ride with you. And so long story short, the reason why and how I'm in watches is because of something that went wrong. I learned at the time where I shouldn't have. We beat all the odds through a recession, and I found my purpose in building brands through that time.
Fascinating. I love how it seems like your self-awareness is quite tuned, in the sense that you knew something was off. Obviously, you had a big, experience in an event, and thank God, I'm happy you reached for the tissue, because obviously, like you said, probably would have been a very different story.
Absolutely.
And we wouldn't have the magic of you on this show right now, but also I can already tell, and I'm sure listeners can feel this as well, like your presence in a room and the work that you do, and when it's infectious. Like you can feel it. Like it's selfishly, it's the best way to start my day, is having a conversation here with you. So for that, I'm lucky or happy you grabbed for the tissue. But I wonder, like, where does the courage come from to go for it? Because there's I think we all sometimes have those signs, or be like, this is not what I'm meant to do. But a lot of people just don't take the step and say, hey, well, I'm going to go spend 5 years on a cruise ship and see where this goes, or I'm going to jump over and we'll see what's on the other side. Like, where do you think you've picked up that sense of courage to do that?
I don't know. Honestly, I don't know, because I look at my mum's health, and I know that you've got to live every day, because you never know what's going on inside of your body, and things can change. And then you've got the stability of my dad, who he's an electrician. He's just a very honest, hardworking English guy, good-humored. But they are at home, and I know they'll always be there. And my friends the same way. I'm from a very, very small town in England, where I could go back and I know where my friends are going to be drinking. I know what I'm going to do at that certain time of the day, and that normality and uniformity is so comforting. And I also know probably that my energy was probably didn't quite fit. So I know that place means a lot to me, and I know I mean a lot to them, and it means a lot to me in that whole circle of life. But if I stay there, I wouldn't be able to be happy. I don't know if I'd. I don't know if I'd make it work within my head. So moving forward, it's not bravery. I just think it's the only way I can be. The only time that I think it became a bit scary was when there was somebody else involved. And again, that selfishness was there before. But when Ashley, who's my wife, she is the yin to my yang. I would walk with her when we first started dating, and I'd feel a pull on the back of my sleeve, as in like, slow down, man. You're with
totally
me.
See that.
Enjoy the moment. And I love that. And I'm like, okay. And she's only little. They've only got little legs, but also, chill, where you gotta go? And so but at the same time, I'm like, if you go a little quicker, we can see that, we've got this really good push-pull thing. And so when I decided to leave this one brand to do normal stuff, went into retail, it was because I wanted to give her and our new baby a chance to see me every day. And in the end, like I said before, that didn't quite work out. But that was a really, really scary thing to move from Michigan. We moved to Texas. And then there's other opportunities that have come on to us all. And one opportunity didn't work out. It was I probably won't say the brand on this kind of thing, but they asked me to join them just because they loved my personality within the industry. I know that. And they knew that I could sell. But what that I think they didn't realize is that it comes with all of it with me. I'm very all in. And that means because of the years and years in the industry, I would know many, many people in marketing world, loads of people in the customer world. And I've always been a one-person show with social or storytelling or training, customer service. It's always all-encompassing and fulfilling for myself. And so when you go into these big brands, like, oh, no, we've got somebody for that. Or we've got somebody who does that differently. Or actually, you shouldn't say that. And that I was like, fine. But naturally, you are who you are. And
that doesn't do well. I know where you're going with this.
You know what I mean? And in the end, it was really hard for the ego. And I've never had and I wouldn't say that again, selfishness and ego are not bad things. But when you're hurt and someone says, oh, I want you, actually, I don't. It's like, it was a bit like a breakup with a relationship that's the best looking girl on the playground. Oh, actually, and she wants to go out with me. Oh, actually, she doesn't. She wants to go with somebody else because it suits her more. I had to deal with that in a different way, right? And so it came to the point where I ended up going back to, it was Bremont. I launched them for North America and going back there with them. And then the whole world changed for all of us when COVID happened.
Yeah.
And I couldn't stay with them either. So you're like, well, what the heck? This is after so long with one brand and you've given so much and you know yourself, but you make that decision to change for your partner, your spouse, your family. But then it's like, oh, that's not right. Oh, it didn't quite work. The big part in my life then was understanding who I am and where I fit and finding my voice again. And so what that took was probably the scariest thing that ever happened to me was through COVID, where I said no to watches. And I looked at the tech world and I was like, I'm just
Zoom, right?
Yeah. And I was asked to be an account executive for Zoom at a time where all of us were talking through it. It was just an incredible time. I'd never sold tech. I'd never thought that way, but it was so comforting. It was the most beautiful year and a half, almost 2 years of my life, because not only did I do it through COVID, I carried on a little bit. And it was only through that second part when the world started to wake up that my juices started to flow again for the luxury world, but also an opportunity to move back to England. So that was 3 moves in a very quick succession from, go from Michigan to Texas to leave watches, then obviously COVID to then go to England. And then the bravery thing was flipped on its head because I wouldn't have even entertained it if it wasn't for my wife wanting to go. And if she was sitting with us right now and we were talking, she will say she loves England, but she couldn't live away from America. She knew she missed Michigan always living in Texas, but as soon as she lived in a different country, she knew that she was an American. And that's great that she knew herself, but it was really hard to see someone fight within herself to try and find her voice. And I was like, right, let's do all these things. This is in my head, all these things over all the years. The only thing that really matters is this family. I know I can go to the moon and make friends with Martians. I just know I could. My kids are going to be fine. They're at an age where they're malleable. We'll just use it as an experience. But if she's not right, she is the anchor to my life, to our family. Then how can I, that yin and yang, that's completely, all of the feng shui is gone, right?
Yeah.
So I quickly just about faced and said, right, this isn't good. We're going back to the States. And during that end of that first year, I was consulting with a few different brands. And one of them says, hey, we know you're in Dallas. Would you come and help us out? I'm like, well, I'm not. And then they said, well, would you move back? And straight away we said, yes. So that's how the car got back and everything.
Okay.
But also, with all these jumps and bumps and things that I think we've all gone through, especially over COVID.
Yeah.
We're stronger. I'm stronger. I know my love for watches is true and powerful. I know that my journey of being on the road and being a good dad and husband has found a balance. But it wouldn't have been there today where I am now if it wasn't through the crash, mom's health, breakup, and in the last few years, just finding your voice again when you thought actually normality is what you need, because that's the great thing to do as a as a dad with 2 dogs and 2 kids and a wife, I need to be a watch person, and I love to be out with the community. And now that I'm with Christopher Ward as their brand director, this first year has kind of let me off the leash after all these years of not pent up, but I've got all this energy. And Christopher Ward is as big as it is, but all it needed was tactility and maybe a storyteller. And that's what this first year for me has been all about.
It's funny you say, kind of let you off your leash, because that's, as much as you were saying, talking about your time at Zoom and how it was comforting and so forth, like I couldn't help but think like the visual I saw was like you're on a leash there in a way. I'm like, there's no way you could stay in a role like an account director at Zoom. I mean, nothing to get Zoom. We're recording literally on Zoom. But it just doesn't seem to match.
But I was doing more than most of the people in the world. Like I was talking to, so I would do things, and this is the great thing that I would always describe with Zoom, is I would talk to a person who has a yoga studio, and she needed to have a few different accounts on the Zoom account so she could do her yoga class to a few hundred people who were her clients, and they couldn't come to her, and she needed that technology to be walked through. Or, and this is my favorite story, I would talk to the producer of American Idol and get all that technology going so they could film American Idol and have that as they did it through that COVID season. I started that conversation off and got that going. It was brilliant from that to that, and all the big companies that wanted to keep going. It was just really extraordinary. And I learned a lot about myself. And Zoom, to their credit, they would send exercise equipment. They would send food to your house. They would bring comedians on. We spoke to all these inspirational leaders. All of that time. Eric, Ewan, and the Zoom team were absolutely incredible for thousands and thousands of people. And in the end, millions and millions of people who were connected.
Wow. It just seems like, I don't want to say, because everything, happens for a reason in a sense, but it seems like the timing of all these events just linked up really well for your journey, right? Like even just hearing what you were saying at Zoom, like that seems like was the perfect moment for that kind of pandemic time. And then, like you said, we started to go back out and life kind of resumed. And it's like, okay, well, you did that chapter, and now back in the watch book kind of thing. And in just now knowing more about your backstory from hearing it from you directly, I can, like Christopher Ward, it's like, well, obviously, even going right back to the conversation we're having around like where you're from and like your friends and your family and so forth. It's almost, because in my mind, the Christopher Ward brand is like it's like the underdog that is I don't want to say fighting, but is giving the big brands a real serious run for their money. And again, like having been wearing the product, like this is a quality timepiece. And I don't know if this is coming from Christopher Ward, if this was another podcast, but it was something like a line around the cheapest, most expensive watches or something like that. It's like something like,
It was something Mike said at a pod, and it ended up being like an unofficial tagline. Yeah.
Okay.
But it really is just about being the best watch that's attainable for everybody. And my whole thing with them is that they're 20 years old this year.
Yeah.
They don't have that story of being in the Swiss Alps and there was an old cow farmer who knew a watch person. There's not that old Swiss wonderful luxurious stories with humble beginnings. It was 3 guys who had an ambition to do something different. And now 20 years later, it's evolved, it's matured to what it is today. And if any of your listeners are out there, just have a look on christopherward.com and you'll be like, wow, these are great watches. Why have I never seen them? And it's because they don't sell them in stores. And so we got to the point where with Mike France, who's one of the co-founders, he reached out to me. Him and his one of the other colleagues, Peter, said, have a chat. And I'd worked for a British brand for almost a decade, Bremont. And I was the voice and face of Bremont here in North America. And no matter what other brand I'd joined to, through Zoom or wherever, or in the different watch brands, I was always known as Mike who launched Bremont in North America. And that was great. That's how you hang your hat. I was waving that British flag high and very proudly so. But with Christopher Ward, and I think with many other British brands, is you kind of have, again, those blinkers on, but this wasn't a good thing. You were blocking out them because they're the enemy. You can't know them because, we are the British brand. And I think more and more the way I was away from watches and also away from Swiss watches, this industry is for everybody. There's great American stories. There's wonderful German, Spanish, Italian design stories, infrastructure all over the world. What I liked about Christopher Ward was not the fact that I'd jumped in without knowing them. I'd worked and relaunched a brand called Zodiac for a couple of years when I came back to America. They were really the brand that got me falling back in love with watches, because it was a Swiss story that was so important, especially in the 50s for dive watches. But then it was owned by Fossil Group, which was everybody's first cheap watch, right? Everyone's first fashion watch. But they had this golden jewel within their repertoire. And I was like, right, we can do this. We can absolutely smash the world with this. And we did. We did really, really well. But also, Zodiac was tiny. But by doing or working with Zodiac, I was in the same space that Christopher Ward's team was. And it wasn't about the watches. It will always be about the watches in the end. But for me, it's about the people. And I saw Mike France unpacking boxes, lifting up signs along there. He's a little older than me right now, but he's still got more energy than anybody you will have on this podcast. I'm sure he's an amazing guy. But you'll find a CEO who's done as much as that he's done in his life, and as many successes he's had. He was helping his team, and I loved that. And then I saw the customers coming, and you can have a salesperson or someone who looks after the events or looks after the social. Yeah, that's their job. But Mike was in there as well, talking to everybody. And I was like, actually, I can see that. That's actually pretty cool. So you kind of sneak over to the table, say hi to them all. Then you get to see the watches and you see why they're all doing what they're doing. And then I started to put my head around how I could fit when he asked me. And I said no for the longest time, just because of, I don't know, maybe it was that Britishness, but more than anything, I think I was happy at Zodiac, and I saw that as a challenge that was attainable. But then my ambition kicked through, and I saw their ambition would match mine. And I think more than anything, again, after all these years in the industry, I know that Mike and Peter Ellis, the founders, they have trust in the people that work for them. Good example is they do a watch called the Bel Canto, which has won a really wonderful award. It's irreversibly changed Christopher Ward, but they never say it's their watch, their design. They're the geniuses to it. They celebrate the watch designers and the geniuses in Switzerland. Yeah. And I think that was the humble side of it that I loved, because it matched hopefully what I feel as a person. That it's go back to, I know that I'm going to make money doing this job for my family, but if we sell a ton of watches, there's more employees that come to the team and we can grow as a company. And I think that's why I look at Mike and Peter that way. But it's a bit special, and because we don't sell in retail stores, we miss out on thousands and thousands and thousands of eyes on it. So I've called it the Taylor Swift tour of the watch industry this year in North America. But instead of having stadiums, I'm going to go to your local brewery, buy everybody a beer, and show you what we're all about. It's been brilliant.
Well, that's where I love, this is where online meets offline, right? And I think there's a special sweet spot there that, first and foremost, we can't forget that we're human beings, and that community and connection. We've evolved with that. And there's the benefits of the fact that you and I are able to have this interview remotely and make it happen. And not to say we couldn't do it in person, but maybe it would have taken more time and effort and so forth. So, I'm grateful for that. But still, I think it's the balance. It's full circle in terms of how you checked in as a dad around, when you're away, when you're there, it's that balance of being intentional. And I think it's brilliant. And I just love, and I have some questions around this for you as someone that's expanding the brand into North America, and what questions you're thinking about. But as someone who studies reflective questions and writes about this and so forth, what really made me fall in love with the brand was just, in the early days where it seems like Mike and the team were asking, well, why are these watches so expensive? What's going on here? And starting to, I wrote a book called Personal Socrates. So that's a Socratic method in all senses of the word. Big question, then, well, wait a second, and you start asking more questions, and we're well, there's massive margins here, do we need that, right? Can we do it another way? Right. All great innovations, that's essentially how it happens. And the result for us as consumers is, at least I feel you're paying a fair price for a product that is of top level quality. And you mentioned, the watch that, what is it? The Bel
Canto.
Yeah, that, it's that's in itself an example of a watch that probably would retail normally at like 10K plus, right?
30. If you ever watch that makes a noise, you look at it 25 to 30 grand minimum. So for us to do it for $4,000 was crazy.
Wild.
But then it goes back to the whole adage, and you eloquently said it. We sell at a different price. So there's a few ways to look at it in this market. If you pick up our watch, like the one I'm holding right now is called the 12. This is titanium. It's got a movement called the SW300. It's slim, it's thin, it's refined. It's a chronometer. It's all elevated. My industry expertise, my industry experience of 17 years makes me, when I hold this watch, know that this should be costing $5,000 to $6,000, but it costs way less than $2,000 because whatever it costs to build, we at Christopher Ward increase that by 3 to get to the retail point. That's been the same for 20 years to today. So if it costs us $300 to build, you'll have a $900 watch.
Yeah.
If we were going to be in a normal retail store, and I say this with all the humbleness in the world, deservedly so, the watch needs to be more expensive. To ship it to America, to get it distributed within, there are duties and taxes. To get it into a store, you have a showcase that has display, and those displays can cost thousands of dollars. To have somebody behind that showcase, they need to be trained. That person that's there every day needs to be paid. Like all of that thing goes, and then obviously there's marketing within it. All of that is essential to grow the brand. And like I said, we miss out on that tactility day to day in every town and city because we don't. But what we have gained in 20 years, and then maybe fast forwarded through COVID, is trust virtually when the internet was young and buying online was new, but especially for luxury goods. But what we've got through COVID is we did it at a bigger level, and you can trust that your apples will come fresh. So why can't you trust that your watch will come perfect? You know, so we've gone through COVID to get to that point.
For sure.
Now, what we want to do is build trust and pillars across the country. And I think that's in life as well, because you and I are having this great chat. And this is the first time we've ever met. I know that when I meet you, I'm going to give you a hug and say, thanks for that hour. It was brilliant. Because that, you know what I mean? That tactility will be affirmed. So what I'm finding now is I'll go to an event. For example, I was just in Los Angeles. Los Angeles is one of the most affluent places in the world. And I think we had 650 people that are around this event. 98% of people knew the brand. I would say 85% of them had never held a Christopher Ward. And then those 15% all owned it. And so what I had was people running to the showcase saying, thank you for coming. And then they held it and they go, oh, okay, good. I'm going to buy it. And all they wanted was just to feel the crown once, turn the bezel, just feel the steel, because there's different edges that matter, or turn their wrists aside and see the dimensions. It's just like going to a tailor. You know, you can buy a jacket off the internet. There's nothing better than someone just patting down your shoulder and saying, actually, the fit needs to be in here, out there, because it suits you. Or just somebody in the mirror, or somebody themselves, or your partner saying, it suits you. And so by us doing these events all across the country, I know in the end, this is a stupid thing for me to do personally for the longest time because it's going to hurt. But if I can get these first couple of years going and that trust is blown through the industry in terms of the community, they will be our storytellers. They will be the people behind the showcases that don't work behind the showcase. They just trust the brand because they met somebody. Yeah. What the next stage is, which is really exciting, is that we will have physical presence in America with showrooms. They are not boutiques. These are not places that you'd walk in and buy. We are going to go in there with a sample selection that you have an hour with someone like me or my team, and you get to fall in love with it, with tactile and understanding. And then you will still buy it online, but we can then help facilitate that sale in a boutique showroom style setting. So we don't lose the business model. We don't have to ship things in and make things more expensive, but you get that hour. And we're not going to be next to a Lululemon or a normal store in a shopping area. We'll be in places you have to come and find us, because it's supposed to be a place where you get that hour for a coffee or maybe a cheeky whiskey if it's later in the afternoon. But we'll make sure we have some good time. So the first one of that opens in September in Dallas.
Oh, exciting.
And then that will hopefully grow over the next few years to different cities across the country.
It's brilliant. Because I think it's, like you said, I mean, you're not jeopardizing the business model with this setup, but then you have all of this, it's all experience. Mm-hmm. Right. And the allure of okay, well, this is not here all the time. It's what I think, like you create that sense of urgency in a way of like, I want to go experience this. This is my shot to do this. And
Yeah.
again, you have that in person, that touch experience, and then you've got the rest of kind of the online world to take care of everything else in the
But it's a
details.
hope, isn't it? Right? I mean, it's all trust in this world, but this will
Yeah.
go a long way towards creating that next part. But America or USA, and I think within Canada, that's over 50% of Christopher Ward's business, and we're only just getting going. So we know that there's a big old world out here, and there's a lot of ambition within the company. We just want to make sure that we still feel like the small brand that we want to know where we're from, but we also want to make sure there's a lot of people that can hold it. And so that, again, going back to maybe my life, I think within a brand like Christopher Ward, I know that the customers out there are screaming to have that balance as well.
Yeah.
Making sure you feel attainable, and communication is paramount, with service being at the front of your messaging. But the watches are great, but you don't feel like you're going to forget your roots and who you were. And I think that's why the business model is so important.
Well, and I also think though, like if I go back to the period of my own life where I think a lot of people are in this boat where you see a watch, or let's just say any kind of luxury timepiece or jewelry or whatever. There's a period where you can just see it as the product, and there's something that shifts though once you bring in that experience, or what we've been talking about, story, and then it's completely different. Right. Like, and it sounds like this happened around when you were on the cruise ship as well, like where, well, I want to know more about the craftsmanship. Like, I think I've watched every Christopher Ward video on the website, like all the history, even my watch, the fact that, it's signed off by the British military, and like the history of military watch, like there's all of that aspect. And then there's a link to my personal story as well when I put it on my wrist. Like, that's the stuff that I feel like in the world that we live in today, where, because I obviously work in the mental fitness space, so see a lot of struggle and loneliness and whatnot. Like, it's these fundamental, I'd almost say ancestral, like community building and chatting with others and having experience that make all the difference, and I think are imperative to us feeling good as humans and thriving and just showing up energized more days than not.
There's my favorite quote about time is in a Star Trek movie.
Okay.
And it says that time is the fire in which we burn. And
Wow.
I truly believe that we are right there within that. And I've got two watches where no matter, and I know I work for Christopher Ward and I will be here for the longest time, but on a couple of occasions I wear my old brand as well, because they were the watches that I've got one model that I wore when both my children were born. So I've got pictures of me with the watch on. I know that matters. And the watch that I wore when I was married, I loved it so much that I the husbands sometimes, or partners, get the chance to have something of their own personality. So I asked for a Death Star cake and she said no. So we had this beautiful, beautiful wedding cake. And then around it, we had these chocolate cupcakes with my watch's base as the top of the cake.
Yes.
Because I had a lot of the watch industry came along there with my friends. And so that's the watch I wore when I was married as well. But those ones there should never leave my collection, because my kids and my wife know that matters. So it's great. And I remember one time, this is when I wasn't working for Chris Ward, and I wasn't in the watch industry, and I was a bit down. And I came into the bathroom and there's a little note, and my wife put my watch down. And she goes, "Let's take it for a walk." And like, she knew that meant that I went to a happy place. And God bless you. She's just the best.
She is a keeper for sure.
Oh, she's way better than I deserve, for sure.
Amazing. Well, I can't think. I mean, we could. We'll definitely have to do probably a part 2, part 3, and maybe we'll do one live at one of your events. Actually, that could be pretty fun as well. But I want to respect your time. I know you've got a busy day ahead of you in New York and so forth. But and I couldn't think of a better place to end. And it's just been all smiles, Mike. I want to thank you for your energy, your presence, and sharing stories, being a bit vulnerable as well, sharing some of the backstory, obviously, to how all this came about. And I guess final question is just for everyone listening. It's probably a mix of people that have experience with beautiful timepieces to people that are like, oh, this is really interesting. I've never really thought of watches in this from this perspective, or just community and brand building and all that kind of stuff. Do you have any final words for us around like how to maybe how to take the next step into this world and just explore the world of watches and so forth.
Sure. Well, firstly, I just want to thank you for the time as well. I've really enjoyed the last hour. And I'll be sending you the check in the post for the therapy sessions. But I have nothing to hide. And like I said, the bad stuff led to the good. So that's how I can always think of life. But for watches, I would always say it doesn't matter. It's not about what anybody else thinks but you. So if you love a Timex that costs $40, or you go past a Casio in Walmart and that color suits you, go for it. And if that's your place to start, brand, what I'll find is that if you are now, especially in this world where there's an Apple Watch in most people's collection as well, it doesn't really matter. You can wear that with a suit or not. What I will say about a mechanical watch, though, is that these things have incredible longevity. I've always been told that fine jewelry, art, and timepieces are the only things that will outlive us all. Everything else is disposable straight away. Technology always moves on, but these watches will last forever. So if you're thinking about what's the first watch I should go for, how much do you want to spend? It doesn't matter about what you can. What do you want to feel comfortable? So if you've got a couple $100, there is a mechanical watch out there for you. And it doesn't even have to start that expensive. There are ones within Swatch that have got a little mechanical. It's called System 51 that goes into, then you can go into Seiko. Then you can start looking into some of the smaller brands. What I will say, though, is that when you find that aesthetic that suits you, just explore that and have fun with it. Which means if you like that pilot style, but you're not a pilot, who cares? Or you like a dive watch, but you don't dive, who cares? As long as you like that feel, that size on your wrist, then you'll go. The biggest thing I'll say is if you are in a city or a town, go online, find it on Reddit, on Watch Crunch, or just on Facebook or Instagram. Find your local club. There's a couple out there. The biggest one that is known as Red Bar Crew. So you can put Red Bar and your city that you're in, Red Bar Dallas, Red Bar Detroit. There's always going to be a Red Bar around. And what they will do is if you love watches and none of your friends know, just go with your little collection or just with an open mind, and you'll see things as big as a Patek Philippe to as everyday as a Rolex or a Breitling. And then you might discover the other brands that you would never have seen as well. So get out there, be brave about it, because you might even make some friends. But more than anything, you'll discover a world of 700 watch brands, but there's definitely something out there for you.
Mike, this has been a real honor. I say right back at you. I've had such a beautiful time speaking with you, and the energy is just so infectious. I feel grateful and honored that I can start my day with this conversation. So for everyone listening, I hope you're feeling that as well. And I'm not getting paid to say this. I'm not like a paid influencer for Christopher Ward. I'm just a huge brand fan. And I reached out to the brand to interview someone from the crew. So just so everyone, I'll always like to disclose that kind of information because I'm just a huge believer in what you guys are doing. And I think everyone can hear the story behind where it's all coming from and what everyone stands for. And just go get lost on that website. There's some beautiful, beautiful things.
And come out to the events. Come and see us.
Yeah.
We're doing them all over as an events page, but come and see us. We'd love to meet you. And if you have any questions at any time, you can obviously reach out to us in social as well. But I really appreciate the time today.
Thank you.
Okay, it's official. We are very much in the final sprint to Election Day. And face it, between debates, polling releases, even court appearances, it can feel exhausting, even impossible to keep up with. I'm Brad Milkey. I'm the host of Start Here, the daily podcast from ABC News. And every morning, my team and I get you caught up on the day's news in a quick, straightforward way that's easy to understand, with just enough context so you can listen, get it, and go on with your day. So, kickstart your morning. Start smart with Start Here and ABC News, because staying informed shouldn't feel overwhelming.